1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to take a minute just to acknowledge Mike Antonovich, the longtime Los Angeles County Supervisor and a good friend of the Nixon Foundations. Thank you for being here. As we continue our conference, A Nation of Narcotics, let's jump into the second panel presentation. There's nothing perhaps more detrimental to anyone today than fentanyl. And to say that its proliferation is a challenge is quite an understatement. Fentanyl pours into our country, and particularly across our southern border, in droves, while interdiction efforts are complicated to say the least, and it's consumed in deadly quantities far too frequently. So Americans today are demanding more accountability from their elected leaders and seeking answers as to how they can help battle this scourge at local community levels. To dive into this more and into this topic more broadly, I'd like to introduce our program moderator, Maureen Nun, a television host, author, and teacher who is an alcohol and drug abuse rehabilitation counselor. Maureen has the additional distinction of being the daughter of Helene and Jack Drown, very close friends of President and Mrs. Nixon, and uses her firsthand knowledge as a longtime friend of the Nixon family to teach kids and adults alike about the Nixon legacy, particularly that of First Lady Pat Nixon, right here in programs at the Nixon Library. She is a member of the board of directors of the Richard Nixon Foundation. It's my pleasure to welcome her and introduce her now, and Maureen will introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much. So as Jim so kindly said, my name is Maureen Nun, and I'm a certified drug and alcohol counselor. It's a huge honor and a privilege to be here today with all of you on the 50th anniversary of President Nixon writing and signing into law the Drug Enforcement Agency. I can't take credit for any of this. This has been a huge collaborative effort, and I'd like to thank Jim Byron. He's right over there taking pictures. He's our chief executive officer of the entire President Nixon Library, and I have to share a story, a very quick story, that I said to Jim, would it be possible to have some kind of information about drugs and alcohol? And he said with great passion, absolutely, positively, yes, and let's do it on August 22nd. So huge thanks to you, Jim, really huge thanks. I'd also like to thank Chris Nordick. Chris Nordick is the Vice President of External Affairs, and I think that if there were a Guinness Book of World Records for the amount of phone calls and emails sent, that Chris right back there would actually get the award. Thank you so much. And another person who really helped in this collaborative effort was Nazim Benyalis. I don't know whether Nazim is here today, but he is the event director. And speaking of event, he and his lovely wife, Megan, just welcomed to the world their first child, a beautiful daughter named Kenza. So I don't know, wherever you are in this world, Nazim, thank you, thank you, thank you. Really, really appreciate it. So as I said, it's an honor and a privilege for me to be here today with this incredible panel, people who have given up their whole day to be here. And I just want to thank them so much. Maybe many of you who are here today have a loved one, a family member, someone really close to you. It could either be a grandmother, grandfather, uncle, aunt who's struggling with addictions, and maybe even yourself. So today, you've heard about the history, and you've heard about the problems of this incredible drug epidemic that we have. And our panelists are not here to solve the problems. Because wouldn't it be a great thing if we had a drug-free world? Wouldn't it be fantastic if people were not dying? And that wonderful woman who's in charge of the DEA now is not walking down a hall with all, my golly, I just was so, could barely speak seeing that. So we're not here to eradicate the problems, but we're here to talk about some of the solutions that you can actually use and take home with you today. That's what we're all about. Before we start, I'd like to show you some of the statistics, and I think they're going to be up on a screen. You heard about the statistics from alcohol, fentanyl. The truth about drugs and alcohol, as you see, fentanyl is a synthetic opiate that is up to 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. Over 150 people die every day from overdoses related to synthetic opiates like fentanyl. 13 years old is the average age children experiment with drugs. Most people who start using drugs and alcohol do not have the information they need before they start. Education on drug abuse is extremely important. 80% of all high school seniors in the United States admit to drinking alcohol at least once. Alcohol is the most commonly abused substance and the third most common cause of death. I understand now it's the #1 cause of death, just listening to the current director of the DEA. The #1 cause of death in the United States. And I won't even read, well, I will. Heart disease and cancer are the second and third then. Over 50% of all traffic accidents, 50% of all suicides, 50% of violent crimes, 80% of domestic violence, 60% of work performances, 30% of college dropouts are caused by drugs and alcohol. And take a breath, lastly, more than $600 billion is lost annually due to substance abuse. So those are the riveting and jolting statistics. And as I said, we are, the wonderful panel here today is dedicated to focusing on the solutions, and they were kind enough to put together a resource page that you have included in your program with the best treatment programs, because there are so many of them. It doesn't mean that if you have a treatment program and it's not there, that it's not a good one, but the best treatment programs, the best counselors, the best books, and the best podcast. Okay, so ready or not, take a deep breath, and here we go. Okay, so my first really special guest is Ed Storti. Ed Storti is a best-selling author. If I don't knock over the coffee and spill it on your beautiful tie, that's a piece of art that you're wearing. It's beautiful. He wrote a book called Heart to Heart that is for sale here, and he's going to talk about another book he wrote. I read this from cover to cover. He's an internationally acclaimed intervention specialist. He has orchestrated over 3,500 interventions. You started in the 8th grade? He also is the creator of the Storti Model of Intervention. And his intervention has 98%, I repeat, 98% success rate. He's a really dear friend. I've known Ed, well, you can't have pot. You mentioned that you've had 50 years, so I think that you all started in the 8th grade. What can I say? So Ed, let's start with the word intervention. What is an intervention? Because it sounds kind of like a surgical procedure.
Thank you, Maureen. And well, let me get right into the question, but I did want to say this. Thank you all for being here and attending. We thank you as a panel, and we know that you can be anywhere you choose to be today, this morning, and you're here with us. So hopefully you'll enjoy the remaining of the presentations that we have. So thank you. As I think of it, is to present a presentation to a loved one to seek help immediately prior to destructive behavior or through tragedy or future crisis. Families will call, or a contact person will call, and they will present their loved one is addicted. And I can ask, well, are there other people that are seeing the same thing? And they will say, yes. We have others that see it. We feel that there could be this tragedy. Is there something we can do? Now, mainly, what you're told, and especially of my involvement over the 50 years here, has been one where you would be told you can't do anything until they want help. You can't say anything until they want help, or you need help for yourself, and then deal with the crisis that might be coming along. But that wasn't good enough for me in 1973 and going into 1975 through my own recovery in alcoholism and finding out that I could do home consultations. And please understand, it's not about me here today. It's about the people that are doing this type of work, that an intervention of going in front of someone and presenting to them in a kind, respectful way that there is a solution and you can have a rebirth. That's what we look for. So as I start to do home consultations, I would notice something, that when I would be talking to the client alone, that they would be denying or just presenting it's mom, dad, brother, sister, but it's not as bad as what they're talking about. But if I'd include a family member or two, then I'd start to get validation that this person needed to go get help. Could we then possibly do something in the text of a motivational type of process? And what I start to lean towards is more people coming into the home, the workplace itself, or a hotel, whatever it might be, and then present to that person with 5, 8, 10, 15 people that would be present and leaning towards, we love you, we don't want to lose you, but we're going to remind you of what a special person you are. And if you appeal to the heart, not the mind, then it would be successful. That's an intervention.
Wow. Okay, so from start to the actual intervention, how do you personally prepare for that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, in the preparation itself, typically, and there's different models of intervening today, from a surprise model where you just walk in and it's going to happen, or in an invite model where the person is invited into a room with the family to talk about what is going on in the family's life. My mainstay of my model was always around walk in, 30% of success was in a surprise. The person didn't know it was going to occur. And that would offset the person thinking about it prior to coming in or having an alibi of why it wouldn't work, those types of things. So that surprise was kind of the sedative. The anesthesia that we would use where they would hopefully be in a surprise mode. 50 added percent was in the people presence. Who could be present in that intervention that could make a difference by their presence alone? And some folks would say to me, well, who might that be? And I would say to them, if they died last night, God forbid, but if they passed away, who'd be the pallbearers, the eulogizers, and people that would be called in reference to tragedy? So it could mean a sorority sister, fraternity brother, it could be grandmom, grandpa, it could be people coming in from distance. The largest group I've ever had was 32 people to walk into someone's home. And yet, it has been as minimal as 2-3 people. Average size would be 10, 12 people walking in, reminding that person that you might not agree to this, but we believe that we're going to offset the tragedy that's going to happen. And if you listen with your heart, we will give you a way out starting today. So that's the prep. So that preparation would be one where there's an inquiry, there's then an assessment, there would be a preparation for 2-3 hours, and then you go and you intervene. Can happen within a 2-day span, sometimes it's over a week span.
Is this intervention specifically for drug and alcohol, or do you intervene with other addictions?
Yes, and there would be other addictions. It would be, of course, alcohol, other drugs, eating disorders, sexual addiction, gambling. I've presented this cancer due to the person giving up on themselves and not wanting to follow through with what the doctor has presented that they might do and go ahead and do, or a surgery pending. They won't do the surgery, and the family is not knowing what else they could do, but at least try something in a loving way. Has been to assist the elderly going from a home to assisted living and knowing that that person needs to be there, but the assisted living won't accept the individual until they abstain from nicotine and alcohol. Because once they start drinking, they'll drop that cigarette and the fear of fire. So interventions have occurred for that. So it's all in the realm of doing the right thing with a loved one, that if you ask them, would you like to go get help? We're wanting you to make a decision, that we're asking them to listen to the people in the room and not trust their thinking, because their thinking has got them to where they're at. And the other thing, too, that you deal with in the preparations and all of the what-ifs that could happen, you work with people, the identified patient, the IP we call them, that they're defiant. I don't want to. I don't have to. I'll still do what I want to do. But what I've learned in field research is that if indeed they'll at least try it and go to a quality treatment program, go to that program, they can make judgment there and hopefully find a desire to want continuum of care. Do you have to have desire to go get help? No, you do not. You can go because your employer says go. You can go because the judge says go. You can go because you have your liver that's giving out on you. So, I mean, you have issues of other interventions. A very loving intervention would be a group coming into a home or workplace presenting, we're not going to lose you. We're not going to lose you. You are too good of a man to lose. So we'll give you a way out starting today. Now that individual could say, sorry, but I'm not going to go. I won't go. And here's what one daughter said to her dad. It was on an East Coast case that I had. And she said, I said to her, Jenny, your dad's not going to be going to treatment today, so you might end with some ending words. She said, Dad, I'll always love you for the rest of my life. You mean everything to me. You know, I'm here today because I knew this is the right thing to do, but I'm disappointed, and hopefully you will, I love the word she said, I hope you'll ferment on what we've talked about.
Wow.
I love that. Hope you'll ferment. I said, that was good. Hope you'll ferment about it. But you know, something has happened for me today. I'm now relieved from the bondage of what more I could have done for you. It's your choice, not mine. I am free today. Isn't that beautiful?
It's beautiful. And what I'm hearing too, Ed, that when you walk in, this is a whole heart to heart. This is not, well, we're disappointed in you. You've let us down so many times. You haven't shown up. This is presented in love.
Yes.
We care. It's a beautiful. How did you come up with this Storti model for?
There was a model, and rightly so, at a different time, and it was around a little bit more around the leverage. You go, or else we're going to do this.
Right.
And the difficulty would be having people attend that intervention, because they wouldn't like to go into any negativity of, if you don't get help, then I won't be your friend. So that could happen. And my feeling was, well, if we go with a rebirth, why not go in and do a living eulogy? But I have to say this to you, it's not me. I'm just one that tripped over the curb, and someone said, hey, would you come into my home, not knowing what to do, but to learn to speak from your heart. And yet, when you don't know what to say and you're speaking to a loved one, there is a spiritual umbrella that you are under, that your words will flow. They just do. And that spiritual peace is powerful. So I've had people, 8, 10, 12 people, attend interventions, and some don't want to be there. Others, if they weren't asked, they'd be upset because they felt they should have been asked. But the bottom line is that they'll all have their opinions about the disease of addiction, what he or she should do, and they just all can be fragmented. But once prepared, and once they speak to someone's heart, the words will flow, and it is just amazing how people, by presence alone and karma being given, that is a eulogy in itself. So, do people not go into treatment and then just state that I will a little bit later? Yes, they do. Yeah, they do. I think there's really a pressure when you're an intervention specialist that people want to see the individual go get help right then and there that day. But I've learned, too, to be patient, and maybe spiritually, that's what needs to be. That the solution was given, the person has to percolate on it, and hopefully they don't hurt themselves or hurt someone else. That's a reason why you want someone to go immediately from a meeting to the treatment program. And oh, by the way, a treatment program has to be standing by. If you're going to be doing a surgery through the intervention, an incision with words, exploring and probing with words, then suturing with words, you want hopefully a treatment center greeting that individual like they won the lotto. And you're here with us. You mean you had 10 people that were concerned about you? Come on in, and we're going to love you as a part of this.
Absolutely beautiful. So we just have a few more minutes, but I'd like to ask you about the risks of intervening.
Yeah, that's a good one, too. I mean, that's another one. And as an interventionist, I always wanted to present risk factors. And in fact, in my packet of information that I would give families, there would be risks in the packet. And one risk would be disappointment. That if the person doesn't go into treatment that day, it's disappointing. You put a lot of time and energy into it. And, you just brood. And my wife is here, Joanne, and she would know when I would come home that if the person didn't go into treatment, she would give me the space to brood over it. I just wanted it for the family members. You hurt for them. They're living in despair. And if they don't go, it's hard for them, if the person doesn't go, it's hard for family members or children or what to have to keep living with that until finally they get their help. So there's that risk. There's a risk of volatility. A person can be volatile. And in this day and age, you have to really be careful with it. I've had at different times that someone might leave a room and they'd say, I'll come back. And okay, so we let them go. We let them go and we have someone, go with them. But they come back sometimes with a little bag, a black bag. And I'm thinking, what's in that black bag? And the person pulls out a gun, a 45. And this particular person said, who is going to take care of Pepe if I leave for this treatment center? Who will take care of this weapon? Because no one is to get rid of this weapon. It's a dear memento I have from a lot of other places. And the group was quiet because we kept thinking,
Who is Pepe?
Pepe was Pepe's the 45. And so we're seated there not knowing what to do. And they look at me like I have the answer. I don't know. So I looked at the person across from me and so I said, Ray, you're the brother-in-law. You'll take care of Pepe, correct? And he says, yes, I'll take care of Pepe. And the patient says, you better, otherwise you'll be in trouble. So I'll go, but take care of Pepe. But that's the stuff you have to be careful with. Weapons this day and age and things of that such that you have to be careful. So that's a risk. And the other would be, if the person doesn't go and a spouse is in fear of any violence or whatever, what happens in them not going? What's going to happen when the doors close and we all leave? So that's another one. Other risk would be you're spending money for the process, the procedure, for a treatment program. It doesn't cure. Hopefully through desire, through honesty, accountability, the person takes it serious where they can be drug-free day one of the intervention. Are there people that experience that? Yes. Are there people that then go back out, try it again? But they're never the same after an intervention and never the same after treatment. 1, 2, field research brought by people, hundreds of people coming back going, I tried it one more time and I've almost lost everything. Wow. So, risk factors.
Thank you so much, Ed. We have about 5 minutes for questions. Do you have any questions for Ed? I see, yes, Julie.
I've heard. Oh, sorry. Thank you. I've heard that it's more of a surprise, and you don't sit around and you don't wait. You just take them. Is that something you've done as well, or?
Well, in my career, my youngest patient was 13 years of age, and they had the capability that someone was actually going to escort that 13-year-old youth, whether they accepted or not. But I presented with the grandfather, uncle, and other family members. And they couldn't really pick up on really what we were saying in the most loving way and kind way, but at least they start to tear up, and they just said, Mommy, where do you want me to go? I don't know what to do. So with that, someone had to escort that individual, the 13-year-old, to a facility in Utah. So it can happen. There are intervention companies that will just come in and take that person right then and there. Now you can say, is that right? Is it wrong? How could they do that parent? But you live with someone that you're in fear for your life when you go to bed, in the sense that you don't know what they're going to do if they come into your room. So that fear is dominant, that we've got to do something to get that individual to go get help.
Hi, Ed. My question is, from like 30 years ago and the approach that you use, is it any different now with like fentanyl and other drugs than it was back then? Are you using the same approach that you use now when you do an intervention?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the hard drugs today that people use, it's difficult. And, it all has to be timed with when I'm sorry for the light being on here, yeah. But it has to be where that, hopefully the person is possibly in an abstention mode at a certain time, or they're coming out of the hospital from a overdose, or the intervention can be done in the hospital in a conference room, and hopefully having certain people, and usually in intervening, you're always looking for 2 diffusers to be present in the group, that by their presence alone, the person won't act out in front of. So again, you have to time it. If the person's, if you will, loaded at the time, very difficult time to go in front of them, but yet if they're in that glow stage of whatever use, you can at least try. Hypothetically, you like to get them, especially with alcohol, when they're coming down from a hangover, or if a person has been arrested or coming back home, the group could be present at that time.
Okay, good question. I'd like to also, Darlene, would you stand up again, please? Or stand up. The light is right in my eyes, but I'd like to acknowledge Darlene Walker. She's the executive director of a very, very successful organization called Options for Recovery, and she has incredible success rate there. I'd like to give you a, if I could stand up applause. So are there any other questions? And if we don't, yes, Anne. If we don't have time for all of your questions, the panel said that they would stay later, and also they can be contacted too. They gave you their phone numbers. All of their phone numbers are in your resource page. So please don't hesitate to call them.
Why don't we take one more?
Okay.
So Ed, I have a question. Does the intervention happen one time, or can you do it a multiple of times?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I pretty much always stood for, doing something, we call it codependent or what, meaning you go through all of this process. You have families flying in, you have people coming from distance, and then thinking you're going to do it again. And here we go. There's a time that they need to be able to, the IP being accountable and responsible. But I'll tell you, I've had a few cases where the husband would call me, or a wife would call me saying he or she has relapsed again. Can we try it again? Could we try it? And I've done it. And they turned out to be really successful. What I noticed was that when you go to intervene with one the first time, especially doing 2 interventions, with the first time, it might take 30 minutes, 40 minutes for that intervention, with the person accepting with grace and saying, thank you, everybody, for being here. The second time, the last time I did an intervention 2 times, was the woman, she went upstairs after 30 minutes of the intervention, and it took 4 hours to be able to have people go up and talk to her, because she had been through treatment, and she kept saying she's therapyized, she doesn't want to hear it, and she has enough vocabulary to keep going back and forth in that sense. And ultimately did go into treatment, and as of this day, she has 21 years recovery. Wow. 21 years. Great. So I thought, I don't know it all. You go in, you walk in, and I'll end it with this. And it would be that if we knew this individual is going to die, God forbid, but pass away in 3 weeks from an intervention, then go in there and present how much you love them. Here's a solution. If you take it, happy for you. If you don't, we're proud we were here, to know that we've done our best. And folks, I'll leave again with this. There's miracles in life. Miracles. I've seen miracles. Absolutely. People that I would think, I just don't know how it's going to happen, or they're going to a center that the family has picked, that I'm thinking, I don't know if that's going to work. To come back thinking, there's a higher purpose that's dealing with this. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ed. That's really beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I also want to I'm not a bookseller, but Ed wrote this book, Heart to Heart, that is so well done, and it's just really a page turner. But you have another book here too called
Crisis Intervention.
Crisis Intervention. So and you brought the books. And he wants to sell all of them. Thank you so much. We really learned an awful lot. So again, we're part of the solution. We know the problem. So thank you again, Ed. Thank you so much. My next special guest is Tara Nierenhausen, and she is the executive director and the founder of a home in a neighborhood called Community's Child. And if there's not a hurricane or an earthquake or a lot of rain falling, from Nixon Library to Community's Child, the home in the neighborhood, would probably take you an hour and 15 minutes. So she is also the founder of a program called Hunger Heroes. She wears so many hats that it's a miracle. Talk about miracles, Ed. It's a miracle we got her today. And all of you, too. I had to kidnap you, hijack all of you, because you're really busy people. So, Tara, before we start, you were kind enough to bring us a video so that we can see firsthand what Community's Child is all about. Okay. So here we go. On site to Lomita, California. An hour and 15 minutes from here. Without an earthquake.
If I'd never come to Community's Child, I'd either be in prison, I'd be dead, but for sure homeless and without my children.
I was just so broken.
I was mentally broken. I pretty much didn't have anywhere to go.
And somebody had told me about Community's Child, so I had made a phone call and I had spoke with Dee Dee, and she had said for me to come down and to interview.
One of my greatest accomplishments, though, is my relationship with the Lord that I gained there.
Community's Child opened up their door for me and my daughter.
I thank God for perseverance. I learned to trust God.
I just didn't know what to do. We were living on the streets and we were living in motels. Well, when I moved into Community's Child, I was freshly sober. I was working with a sponsor. I was going to my meetings, and Community's Child helped integrate church and Christ into my life. They taught me how to pray again and how to have faith again.
And I'm trying to save to buy a house. I'm like, that's one of my ultimate goals right now.
Like I finally was able to complete something, to do something without quitting. Being that Community's Child, it gave me hope. It gave me a purpose. You know, it gave me a reason, and to see that, you know what, I can do it. I can do it.
I've worked really hard to be where I'm at today. I love my children very much, and life is not always easy, but persevere, and with patience and with the support of people in your life and being open, that you can get far too. And you don't have to live in abuse, you don't have to live in poverty, you don't have to live in fear.
So our job is to come alongside and provide the skills, the tools, the education, the support that will take them to the next level, so that they can not only be self-sustaining, we want them to get to the point where they're actually giving back to the community that gives so much and so much into their lives.
And I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the love, all the support, all that you give, and how you can contribute to Community's Child. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today. So you, excuse me, you wear many roles, jackets, hats, and the whole thing, and do it where you're doing. But let's talk about you. Talk about who is Tara Nierenhausen, and how in the world did you decide to do this?
God. I think you can tell by watching the video that Community's Child is definitely a God-inspired ministry. I immigrated to the United States, I guess it's been about 22 years ago now, from Canada. I have a background in social work and special ed. And then once I got here, I quickly had to learn the nonprofit way. So I went to Cal State and took the nonprofit management program. I started at a crisis maternity shelter in Harbor City. It's on the list there, Casa de los Angelitos, which is also where I met Darlene. And I need to tell you that Darlene should be sitting right next to me, because Darlene is the other component to our shelter. She is actually the recovery component, and I don't do this alone. It's called Community's Child because it takes a community, and both Dar and I know how much community it really takes. While I was at that crisis maternity shelter, which is great, it's great. The women come in. A lot of time they were going to DARS program because they were dealing with addictions. DARS is one of the few programs that actually takes infants and provides the daycare so that the women can do treatment while they're in a shelter. The problem with the shelter is that when the babies were only 3 to 6 months of age, and at 6 months there had to be something wrong with the baby to stay that long, they had to exit. Because they'd given healthy birth, it was good, but now it was my job at that point to find housing for them. I couldn't. LA County has a really big problem with affordable housing, and these women had come out of really bad situations. I got really envious when I heard about the interventions. I'm really passionate, so if I cry, please excuse me. Because the families we deal with, they don't have that kind of support. They don't show up at the front doors of shelters because they have a team behind them. They show up at those front doors because they don't have anyone behind them. Even the person, the father of the baby isn't there anymore, and if he was really abusive. So they show up at the door abandoned, hopeless, terrified, and they need God. So the crisis maternity shelter, I stayed there for 3, almost 4 years while I went to Cal State, got the nonprofit certification, and then I knew I had to do something more. They needed longer term. You don't deal with all the core issues that led you to homelessness and to addiction and everything else in that short of a time. You're going to need time to do all the counseling, to go into DARS program, which is a year process for them to deal with the addictions, and then start working on their educations on the ways to becoming sustainably employed, to have really good parenting skills, to have, Maureen, you work on self-esteem with them, right? To really think positive things about themselves. So I did that. I went out and I got a group of people, and we formed Community's Child, and we formed a place where they can stay, a home for 2 years while they work on all of those skills.
So you just said 2 years. Why 2 years? Sometimes that seems like a really long amount of time. So what are the components that actually are included in the 2 years? Because you also have 98% success rate. That would be a follow-up question. So first answer the components and then the success rate, and tell us about some of the graduates.
Okay. The program, like I said earlier, to deal with the core issues that brought them to the front door, you can't deal with those in not 3 months, 6 months. Darlene's working real hard when they go over to Options for Recovery to deal with the core issues that led to addiction and to help them move past that addiction. So we at least need that first year of really solid base, so that if they don't have the recovery, they have nothing. If I just offer them a home and a place to stay and they don't stay clean and sober, they have no life. They have to have that core. So when they come in, if there's a history of drug and alcohol, it is mandatory that they go to Darlene. We work together in the community. So that's the first year. The second year is now we're going to have to look at the education component. I think the other part I need to tell you is kind of... I really liked behavioral studies. And one of the things I learned in behavioral studies is you need to give people a normal routine. These girls don't know get up early in the morning, right? They don't even know how to clean their house. They don't have any skills. So it takes time to teach even the base skills of a morning routine for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and they have children. These children need to have regular bedtimes. They didn't have that. So, and then we're dealing with the core issues, the trauma that they've been through, the abuse, the neglect. Some of the stories I've heard from these women would just terrify you. They have to deal with all those core issues. Their children have to deal with those core issues. We have individual counseling, we have group counseling. We use, again, Harbor UCLA for the TIES program for trauma for children that have been traumatized. So all of that trauma has to be dealt with, and you know about that, Maureen, because you come in and deal with some of the issues with them too. And then all the skills have to be rebuilt, and they have to learn how to manage life. It's not just education, it's how to manage life on an everyday basis, which is something that you and I take for granted, but this isn't something they've ever learned. They've been beaten, pushed aside, abandoned. They don't even know how to clean a floor. Like it would amaze you at what they don't know, and it takes that long. And the reason it's 2 years, because we've gone past 2 years, but we have to stop at 2 years because that's a government enforced rule. If they stay past the 2 years, they can then say that the shelter is their permanent resident and I can never ask them to leave. So when we hit the 2 year mark just before, most of them have completed by 2 years, but I have had 2 that didn't, so I sent them out. I kicked them out. Actually, I put them in a hotel. I put them in a hotel for 2 weeks. They were discharged from the program, and then I brought them back in. One needed 2 additional months. The other one needed 3 additional months. So we have found that around the 2 year mark is when they're ready. It's when they really have the skills. Now, we help them. We don't just say bye. We help them transition. We have a full forced savings program. Actually, our program is so structured, there are 12 pages of rules and regulations. There's no drugs. Yeah, it's very structured. No drugs, no alcohol. There's curfews. They aren't even allowed to be in a relationship. They're not healthy enough to be in a relationship. They need to be working on a relationship with themselves, a relationship with their children, and we give them a relationship with the Lord so that they have a place to go, because I'm not going to be there forever, Dar's not going to be there forever, but the Lord's going to be there forever for them. So we set that foundation. The other part is we have a saying that says, once a CC girl, always a CC girl. As I said, they don't have family. So we become family. We've become the surrogate family. So we are packed at Thanksgiving. We are packed at Christmas. We will. I think we did a Healthy Families program, and I think we had 93 alumni come to this, and they like to come. It's like coming home. And I did have one mom who had graduated, had got her degree, was working, but she fell. She fell at work. She shattered her leg, and I wouldn't have known about that except one of her daughters called me and said, we're really hungry. And I said, why are you hungry? And she said, well, Mom's not working right now and we're having trouble paying the rent, and we don't have any food in the house. So I talked to Mom and I said, you know, when you fall like that, it isn't anyone's fault, and what you do is you come home. And I happened to have a bed available, so they came home. And she stayed until her leg healed, which was another 3 months, and then went back to her medical billing, medical assisting. She's now got her social work degree. Did you know that? That was the first woman you saw in the video. Esperanza is her name. Yeah, and she just finished her bachelor's in social work.
You have other success. One of them bought a house.
We have huge successes there. Now, we have a 98% success rate, but I need to say that's for the ones that complete. They don't all complete. Usually the first 3 to 6 months, usually the first 3 months is when we're going to see whether they're going to stay or not. It's like any other treatment facility. They have to want the program. And we do everything to encourage them to want that program, but at the end of the day, and you will know this, it's up to them. So we do have some that opt out. I will say that it's harder now. Fentanyl is a really tough drug, and COVID really posed some big problems. I think that, I know that the government, I think, wanted to be doing really good things when they took everybody and put them into hotels so they wouldn't be homeless, and they wanted them to stay there so that COVID wouldn't spread, but I don't know if you know this, but they were actually allowed to use drugs and alcohol while they were there. It was actually being delivered to their doors, if you want to know the truth, to keep them there. That has undermined my program and Darlene's program so heavily that we are still still trying to recruit people to come in. And they just think that they can just continue to get government assistance, so they don't need to come. And although I'm not a proponent of jail, I am a proponent of consequences. I am a proponent of natural consequences for inappropriate and law-breaking behaviors, and we don't seem to have those anymore. They seem to be really diminished. So a lot of times that's what it takes, like you said, during the intervention, for people to want to come in and to change their lives. So I think along with fighting the fentanyl program, we got a systemic problem that we are battling too, and we're losing them, and we're losing them really young. The stats that I saw there, we do have other programs, and one of the things that I'm involved in is I work with the Torrance Unified School District, and we meet with the social workers, public health nurses on a regular basis, and middle school. The kids are using in middle school. It's an epidemic in middle school. The they have like guards that are working in the schools. This is Torrance, right? Torrance, and they can't keep up. And the kids are ending up in ER. We have a big problem. And I hope we can come up with solutions. There's stuff there, but I think we need some systemic change too.
You mentioned higher power, you mentioned God, and you mentioned that, you give all glory and God. What would the program be like? Well, let me backtrack with a question. When you write ongoing grants to keep Community's Child is the house, name of the house in the neighborhood, but you write grants all the time to keep this going. And so sometimes when you write a grant and they say it, you see at the bottom, they see at the bottom, non-denominational and faith-based, what happens between you and the grant that you're writing?
For the shelter, I can't get any government funding.
No government funding?
No, none at all. Because if you walk through, there's scripture all over the walls. And I do not hide the fact that we are faith-based. I brought some literature today. You can take a look at it. I trust God for the funding. So all of our funding actually comes from donors like you, right? It's donors like you that actually donate to the house. I do have some local foundations, but it's the smaller ones like National Charity League, Palos Verdes Junior Women's Club, things like that. I used to be able to get some funding from Kaiser, but I can't now. There's the new equity and inclusion, and I was asked to write a statement about that. Now, I need to tell you something. As a special ed teacher, I knew about inclusion way before this ever became a buzzword, right? I actually got a little frustrated when I heard this coming out because I was thinking, where were you back then? Where were you back then when the kids with Down syndrome and with autism and stuff were being excluded? Where were you? So don't talk to me about inclusion. But now inclusion's become a buzzword with a twist. And the twist is I have to now conform to their idea of inclusion. And actually, I don't care if you're gay or not. I really don't. The first mom that came in to my shelter has now transgendered. I still love her, absolutely love her. I've watched her kids go to hell and back through this process. We provided the counseling for those kids, but I'm not going to stick a banner up promoting. But I don't stick a banner up promoting anything, right? It's not that I don't not promote that. I don't promote anything. Matter of fact, as a nonprofit, I was told we're not allowed to promote, right? It was made really clear to me that, can't get involved politically, can't get involved in all of that. So, but now all of a sudden it's changed and I'm supposed to start promoting things that maybe I don't value. And so I said no. And so now we're losing funding from larger organizations that want me to do the promotion. I'm just going to stick with where we're at, which is I don't care what you believe when you knock on that door. I just know that I need to love you. I need to provide the best housing, education, support programs that we can provide so that you can move forward. And I do that through a ministry of love and restoration. I was actually, the one that led me to do this was the story of Jesus with the woman at the well. right? That woman at the well, she had a lot of stuff going on in her life that wasn't good, but Jesus never judged her. He just gave her a better way. And that's all we do. It's no judgment. It's just a better way.
Thank you so much, Tara. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you, Maureen.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. You know, in the 12 steps, it starts with God, whoever your higher power. In counseling, I have actually met patients whose higher power was a doorknob. So whatever your higher power is in life, whether it be God or the higher power, I think that's probably what I've heard is about the only way you can really get through this. And you mentioned about the spiritual umbrella. Thank you so much for that. Are there any questions for Tara? Yes, Leanne.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question for Tara, and I'm here with Diane, who is also on the board of directors of the Volunteer Center, not too far away from Lomita. And we have a program that we started last year that is for teens, and it is a social emotional wellness program with volunteering built in, service learning. What I would like to know is what components of our skills, life skills that we're teaching these young people, would you like us to emphasize so that they don't end up having the issues that you are dealing with?
Great question. We just started something called Healthy Families, which is a sort of counseling and support program for families, excuse me, and we have teens in there. The psychologist that we work with her answer is going to be socialization. They are very socially isolated. They don't know how to communicate. COVID, on top of the gadgets that we use for communicating, the teens are terrified. They actually don't know how to do eye contact. They don't know how to open a conversation. Our teens were talking about how they don't know how they're ever going to have a relationship, like boyfriend, girlfriend, because everything is done online and they know it's not real. So that's one. The other one is we do something, and I will share this with you. I will actually give you the curriculum. I will give it to you. We do a care box, and we go through them, all of the things that might be causing them anxiety, might be causing depression, because those are the keys. Those are the things that are going to lead to using drugs and alcohol. If you've got social, emotional impacts, right, and impairments, you're going to try and find a way to self-medicate. So we try and give healthy ways to deal with those. It might be something as simple as square breathing. It might be a squishy ball. It could be, there's a whole gamut, but I will give you that toolbox. I would suggest that you work with the teens and allow them to do it. I would also suggest that when you're working with the teens, make something creative hands-on. We've actually had them do like pottery, where they decoupaged it with their family because we were dealing with family issues. And then they actually planted something in because they wanted their family to grow. So try and use hands-on materials while you're speaking with them. It makes it easier for them to talk because they're not able to just sit there across the table. So if you're engaging them in an activity while you're doing this, you'll get a lot more participation.
We're going to table the question, but you can answer the question later or come up to Tara during our break time and ask her some more questions. Because I'd like to actually welcome Bill. Thank you again, Tara. Thank you so much. So Bill Woodbury, drum roll, boom, 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 boom. Thank you so much for waiting.
Oh my.
So Bill Woodbury is a certified drug counselor. He's also worked in the field of substance use disorder. He is an author of a book called Enableism, which is right here. I also read this from cover to cover, and it's on sale. He and his lovely wife, Linda, will you stand up, please? Give us that shout out, okay? And next to you is Joe Storti, Ed Storti's lovely wife. Okay, so wrote the book, and you have
Thank you very much.
Been involved. You've had many, many roles, including training other counselors, training other people to be counselors. You're an equine assisted counselor. I just read that equine means
means horses.
horse.
Yes.
This is really good.
Yes, it does.
And that you and your lovely wife are co-owners of Bridging the Gap Recovery. So let's start with the book. I have a lot of questions to ask you. We don't have how much time do we have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. So I have a lot of questions to
Sure.
ask you. So maybe I can ask you those questions down and you could address those.
Okay.
The ones that you want to address. And then I would really like you and Linda to do some role playing. I think oftentimes that parents need scripts. If their child comes in and says, you can't tell me what to do, it's a free country. And then what do you do if you suspect that your child is using drugs? What is the conversation? What does it sound like? What are the exact words? You can't pick my friends for me. It's a free world. And I don't need a babysitter. I'm 13 years old. For heaven's sakes, I can definitely take care of myself. I've really just dropped this in your lap.
Yeah, all in 10 minutes.
We're going to go from enablism to overcompensating to family investment plan. Okay.
Yeah, go. Well, it's really great to be here. This is an honor to be here. Those gentlemen that presented the history of, in some ways, how we got here is pretty amazing. And so this is good stuff. Thank you very much for inviting all of us and myself. Yeah. Well, I can give you a quick rundown. I've been in the field of recovery, addiction recovery, since 1988. I'm a frontliner. I've always been in the trenches. I've run programs. I've done interventions. That's how I met Ed Storti in '93. He's been a mentor of mine ever since. I learned the Storti model, and it was quite beneficial in many things I did, not only interventions. About almost 10 years ago now, I started seeing a lot more overdoses and younger overdoses. And it was, having been in the field a long time by then, it was very frustrating to watch these young men and women not catching on to recovery and having tremendous consequences for their relapses and overdosing, and many of them dying. And it was starting to get more common that I would get calls from parents saying, my son and daughter have passed away. And it was starting to really affect the field that I love so much. And so we started doing a lot of investigation and work into the opiate epidemic. At that time, it was very much driven by the prescription drugs. Big Pharma was causing a lot of stress and problems in families, and addictions were getting way out of hand. And then when the people couldn't find the prescription drugs, then of course the business entrepreneurs that we would call dealers would then say, well, why don't you try this? It's cheaper, and they would put them on heroin. And all of a sudden, the deaths were increasing, and it was really getting out of hand. So in working a lot with families in the treatment center, I accidentally came on a word. I was going to say alcoholism, and I said enablism. That the family's side of the coin is they have a lot of the same symptoms as the person addicted to drugs, but they get addicted to control, to trying to fix a problem. It's not their fault, but they can't fix it. So they become emotionally dependent on the enabling behavior, which can either look like giving in constantly or look like building a wall. So that's where the term overcompensating came in. The idea of overcompensating is codependency had kind of lost its energy. So what happened was people were using it more as a finger-wagging word rather than part of an explanation to what was going on in the family crisis. So overcompensating gave them an understanding that was much more beneficial, I think. And so as this developed and I kept working and working, my boss at the time, Ed Spatola at Newfound Life, said, you ought to write a book. I'm not much of a writer. I've always dealt with some dyslexia and, interesting different behavior and learning habits over my years. And I said, sure, I could write a book. And, by the grace of God and in the power of my faith, I wrote that book. Every day I was disciplined, and people that know me, I'm not a disciplined person. And I wrote a manuscript, and people read it, and they went, well, that's interesting. It's not quite there yet. It's going on. So Linda and I were in church one day, and I was praying, saying, hey, God, I need some help. Should I get a ghostwriter? I'm stuck. And my wife is a joyful praiser, as we would say. And she was singing and up and singing, and I'm down, kind of praying and being quiet. And I felt this kind of neck twist. It wasn't from this world. And I felt God tell me, your co-author's right there. You have a brilliant wife. She's a wonderful writer. She's very articulate. What are you doing? She's right next to you. So I asked her if she would be a co-author of the book. And she said, that means I am a co-author. I'm not just a ghostwriter. I said, no, you are it. And we went about writing the book, Ableism. And she brought so much depth into it and understanding. She's gone on to get her master's in family science from Concordia University. She's a brilliant person and has added quite a bit to this whole work that we do, so much to the point that we're looking to do some revisions and bring more energy into ableism. So the idea of ableism is to help families in the first year of the crisis of addiction to understand that addiction is something that you don't just learn. You have to be taught, you have to be retaught, and you have to be humble enough to look at your part.
Bill, I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
It's not a problem.
No. But
I could go on for days.
No, and I'm looking at the clock here, and I really probably overstepped it. But could you get to actually some of the role playing, because you're so great at that? Maybe even with your
Well,
wife?
I don't know if Linda feels you want to come up and try this. Would you like me to handle this one? You want me to handle this one? Okay.
Okay, let me be the.
Okay, that's
I'll be
fine.
the kid then.
It's all my yes.
Okay, so I'm 13 years old. You don't trust me at all.
You're right. I don't. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, I have a
You don't
sense of
trust me
humor.
at all, and now you're preaching to me about the friends that I'm hanging out with. It's a free country. It's a free world. So stop preaching to me.
Right. And usually that conversation doesn't come just on a one-off. It's been building. Oftentimes it's over-parenting in some cases, being responsible for, not responsible to their teenager, not realizing that they do have a voice, they do have some understanding in their own personality. So in that case, I'm going to ask, well, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what it is you mean by those statements. Those statements alone, I think, have some depth to them. So let's talk. I want to hear what you have to say.
I really, really appreciate you using the word hear, because oftentimes we bark orders at our children because we are humans, but the fact is when you're saying, I want to hear from you,
I want to hear from you.
Is powerful. It's really, really powerful.
There's more energy to that than just a hurtful statement of, my home is like a jail. Well, we all know their home's not like a jail. And they probably live in a very nice place with, 3 hots and a cot, if you will. And they're well taken care of. They've got their iPhone. They've got all the goodies that they want. So there's more behind that, and we need to listen.
This is powerful that you said that, because I think it's really worth repeating when we just bark orders, hurry up, we're late, get your soccer clothes, come on, we got to be on the field.
Give them a list.
Oh my gosh, and it's just incredible. Talk very briefly about the family investment plan.
Well, that is kind of where we ended up with the enableism. It is a family investment plan, and the family does invest in ways to ask questions, to listen, to be strong listeners, to take a part in the recovery process, that you're forming a family bond that is based on communication, not based on fear. So it's based on love and understanding, it's based on patience, it's based on respect.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness. I don't know whether we have time for a question, or if you would, Chris?
we're tight on time, but I tell you what, I would like to ask just one question.
Sure.
I am a father of 3. I've got a 1.5-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 9-year-old.
Yay!
And hearing
Nice.
hearing what's going on now as young as middle school,
Yes.
quite frankly,
Even earlier.
scares the heck out of me. And I'm going to put myself at risk here, so please don't bash me if you think negatively of me. But I have been operating under a sense of being pretty candid with my kids, pretty young, 5 years old. Started to warn them about the dangers of drugs and alcohol. Am I doing it wrong?
I don't believe so. I believe it's a balanced act, if you will. You're talking about the dangers of drugs and alcohol. That's very important. But you're also talking about positive alternatives. You're talking about the energy and the joy that they can have in life, that they don't necessarily need to fill those voids up. Faith is very important. The understanding of a balance in communication, again, is very important at 5 and 6 years old, listening to them, not just barking at them.
Well,
so you're doing well, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you. We are tight on time, but we're going to break for lunch. And in the room where you had the coffee reception this morning, there is Jimmy John's Catering. So there's sandwiches and cookies and pickles and drinks. So go grab some lunch, come back here and begin eating, and then we'll roll into our keynote speaker during lunch.
Thank you so much. And also to repeat, I want to thank the panel so much. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Bill. And please know this is not the end of this discussion. They can be reached. The telephone numbers are in your resource page. And also, please, please, please know that we really have a passion for doing something about this. God bless you all.
Where's the table for the book? Thank you.